I've been around. I traveled a bit. It's about a year, you know. I don't know. It doesn't seem that long. It seems...
The glamour of Hollywood once made people believe that its stars were flawless beings, fragrant, beautiful, and untouchable, like gods among mortals. But behind the silk gowns and polished tuxedos lies another world, one far more pungent than anyone could imagine. Some actresses who embodied purity lived in rooms thick with the scent of old perfume and stale powder because they feared touching water. Some leading men who made millions swoon could clear an entire film set the moment they took off their shoes, and some screen goddesses slept in their makeup for nights on end, until their pillows became ghostly replicas of their faces, soaked with sour traces of foundation and sweat. In today's video, we'll walk through the haze of lights and cigarette smoke to meet 12 legendary Hollywood icons, stars who didn't just shine, they reeked, quite literally. Stay until the end, because the last name on this list will make you realize that no matter how beautiful someone is, sometimes you just don't want to sit too close. Greta Garbo slept for days with layers of old makeup until her pillow changed shape. Those who once entered Garbo's private room at the Beverly Wilshire in 1935 all said the same thing. The smell in there could make you dizzy. Garbo almost never bathed. She believed water washed away one's aura and made the skin age faster. Each night, instead of washing her face, she wiped it lightly with mineral oil, then applied a fresh layer of lead-based foundation and beeswax to maintain the glow. Day after day, the layers built up like a mask. Pillows, sheets, and towels were stained with makeup, powder, and sweat. A housekeeper told the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, her room smelled of old powder mixed with human skin, sweet, heavy, and sour like spoiled cosmetics. The air in her dressing room was always thick. Cosmetics covered every surface. Makeup cups turned murky, powder pads scattered around. Makeup artists at MGM had to wear masks while touching up her face because the smell of mineral oil and lead made their eyes sting. One recalled, "The moment you opened the door, that old powder smell hit you and clung to your clothes for hours." Garbo also refused to wash her clothes. Velvet gowns, fur coats, and silk scarves all showed yellow stains around the neck and sleeves. She claimed they contained the energy of the character and must not be cleaned, only sprinkled with talcum powder. That acting energy was, in truth, just the smell of dampness and sweat. When she lived in her Manhattan apartment in the 1950s, neighbors said they could tell Garbo was home just by the faint smell of old makeup seeping through the door. One writer for the New York Post noted, "The fifth-floor hallway always reeked of mineral oil and stale powder." Garbo rarely received guests. Perhaps that's how she preserved her mystique, a legend wrapped in powder and loneliness. She didn't bathe, didn't launder, didn't open the windows. The most beautiful woman on screen was, in truth, someone who made others hold their breath when entering her room. 2. James Stewart never changed socks all day, leaving the film set reeking of old shoes. James Stewart was the image of the ideal American man, tall, polite, soft-spoken. But anyone who stood near him for 5 minutes knew that reputation couldn't mask one infamous thing: his legendary foot odor. Throughout the 1940s at MGM Studios in Culver City, Stewart was known for his odd habit of never changing his socks during the day. Having once been an Air Force pilot accustomed to wearing boots for 16 hours, he brought that routine back to the movie set. Heavy leather shoes, thick wool socks, and the California heat, the result was a potent mix of sweat, dead skin, and mustiness. A 1947 wardrobe record noted, "Stewart's shoes emit a strong odor. We must sprinkle them with tea leaves and baking soda after every shoot." When he removed his shoes, the smell spread so fast that director Frank Capra ordered all windows opened and industrial fans turned on. One technician described it. It was like stepping into a steam room made of old shoes. His habits extended beyond his feet. Stewart often rewore undergarments for days, merely hanging them to air out overnight. The chair he sat on in Rear Window had to be replaced twice because sweat had seeped into the leather. Co-star Audrey Totter recalled she took the long way around whenever he took off his shoes during breaks. When asked, Stewart brushed it off, calling it a man's natural scent. On set, the mix of shoes, sweat, and makeup powder created a signature smell. Crew members joked, "You don't need signs, just follow the smell to find Stewart." Yet, despite it all, audiences adored him. On screen, he was the picture of decency. Off-screen, he was the man no one wanted to sit beside when the air conditioning broke. 3. Gregory Peck declared that natural body odor was the essence of masculinity. In the summer of 1953, during the filming of Roman Holiday in Rome, no one could forget the scene where Gregory Peck, in a drenched shirt, acted beside Audrey Hepburn. What they remembered even more was the smell, dense, musky, and overwhelming, forcing the camera to move several feet farther away. Though refined and gentlemanly, Peck had little concern for hygiene. He never used deodorant, avoided perfume, and rarely bathed during long filming days. In an Esquire interview, he once said, "I believe in the true scent of a man." That truth filled every corridor of Cinecittà Studios. Under the blistering carbon lights that reached over 45 degrees, Peck sweated profusely. His shirt soaked through, collars turned yellow, and even the chair absorbed the odor. The crew had to change the seat cushions regularly. Even alcohol wipes couldn't fully remove the scent. A technician recalled, "Whenever Peck walked by, it felt like the temperature and the smell went up." He often let his shirts air dry and wore them again, blending fresh sweat with old, forming his own signature scent. At the Hassler Roma Hotel, where he stayed during filming, his bed sheets turned yellowish and damp. Housekeeping notes read, "Strong body scent, difficult to remove, requires full sun drying." Audrey Hepburn, gentle as ever, wrote in her diary, "He's so polite, but I wish he'd bathe every day." During the wrap party, Peck's seat was placed near a window, not for prestige but for ventilation. Ironically, the man who embodied elegance on screen was, in person, the reason Roman Holiday didn't need smoke machines. Gregory Peck was enough. Or Grace Kelly, the Princess of Chanel No. 5, who feared water and rarely bathed. Grace Kelly's beauty made the world call her the flawless rose. But to those who shared a dressing room with her, she was less a rose and more a walking bottle of perfume. Not because she wanted to smell nice, but because she despised water. During the 1950s, while filming To Catch a Thief in Nice, France, the Paramount crew had to adapt to her peculiar habit. Kelly didn't bathe daily. She believed water dried the skin and washed away natural radiance. Each morning, she wiped her neck and underarms with alcohol-soaked cotton, then sprayed Chanel No. 5 from head to toe on her skin, nightgowns, bedsheets, even curtains. A staff member at the Carlton Hotel told Paris Match that Kelly's perfume clung to the fabric even after 3 washes. Her room always smelled like an overstocked perfume boutique, enclosed, sweet, and heavy. Under studio lights, sweat mixed with Chanel No. 5, creating what one crew member called luxury you could barely breathe in. Even after becoming Princess of Monaco, Kelly kept the same routine. Le Monde once reported that the palace had a whole wing for her perfumes and single-use linens. Her maids confessed they had to steam her rooms daily to reduce the lingering scent. Under the lights, Grace Kelly looked ethereal, radiant as a dream. But those who stood too close knew that she was the woman who smelled so divine. It made you want to step outside for air. 5. Rita Hayworth haunted Hollywood with the smell of melting makeup under hot lights. In the glamorous 1940s, Rita Hayworth defined allure. But behind the silks and sparkles lay a secret the whole Columbia Pictures crew suffered through: the smell of burning cosmetics. On the set of Gilda in 1946, temperatures under the carbon light soared above 40 degrees C. Rita wore thick layers of lead foundation, rice powder, and raw lanolin, sheep fat with a distinct animal scent. Under the heat, the mixture melted and steamed, releasing visible vapors. A lighting technician told Life magazine, "You could see a white haze around her face, not mist, but fumes from the makeup." She never cleaned her face thoroughly, believing powder locked in beauty. Each night, she simply wiped it with a damp towel and reapplied cream. The layers built up, irritating her skin until it flaked and oozed oil. A Beverly Hills dermatologist had to exfoliate her scalp weekly with a mild acid. Still, Rita refused to change. Her Columbia dressing room was perpetually humid and filled with the odor of old powder and dried sweat. She hung wet towels to keep the air moist, turning the place into a musty chamber. A makeup artist described, "The air was so thick you could feel it stick to your skin." After she left, fans ran for 2 hours to clear the smell. The Los Angeles Examiner wrote in 1952, "Rita's beauty makes the world stare, but her makeup makes the studio gasp for air." Rita Hayworth was proof of an era when beauty was painted with lead and grease, and behind the lights shimmered a face that quite literally smoked. After Hollywood had endured enough of burning powder, American television soon met its own ordeal. This time, not from makeup or perfume, but from the smell of hair dye and a peculiar way of washing clothes. Lucille Ball, drying underwear with a heat lamp and hair steeped in strong dye like chemicals. In the golden age of television, Lucille Ball was the emblem of American laughter. But behind the scenes of I Love Lucy at CBS Hollywood, people remembered her not for the laugh, but for Lucille's signature blazing flame orange hair came from a powerful ammonia-based Clairol dye. To keep the color, she had to touch it up every 2 weeks and rarely washed her hair. Her scalp became irritated and oily, yet Lucille only patted it with a dry towel and sprayed on more hair oil. After a few shooting days, her hair turned slick, catching stage powder and sweat. The mix of dye and hair oil spread across the set. A cameraman told TV Guide in 1956 that, with just a turn of her head, the chemical tang made the whole crew's eyes sting. It wasn't only the hair, her clothes were another memorable story. With a packed schedule, she had no time to launder undergarments and often hung them beside a heat lamp to dry and wear again. The heat lifted the scent of old sweat and powder, which settled into the curtains, carpets, and walls of the dressing room. When CBS renovated the stage in 1957, they replaced everything because the dye smell and damp fabric odor couldn't be removed. Lucille also sprayed inexpensive perfume to mask it, making the air thick with synthetic notes. A wardrobe worker said, "Her room felt more like a mixing bench for chemicals than a hair station." At the peak of season 3, her hair began falling out in patches from scalp damage, forcing specialists to craft a custom cap to cover thinning spots. On camera, Lucille still glowed in floral dresses with a radiant smile. But backstage, people joked that standing near Lucille means you can guess the Clairol shade chart. Lucille Ball was a textbook example of that era's Hollywood, dazzling, chaotic, and messy beyond belief. When the stage lights went dark, what lingered was the smell of dye, sweat, and a room that cleaning staff wouldn't stay in for long. After leaving CBS with Lucille Ball's dye-laden aura in the air, Hollywood thought it had endured enough chemicals. But no, Just a few years later, they met a star who made everyone turn away. 7. Gary Cooper skipped brushing for years, afraid it would hurt his gums. Gary Cooper embodied the ideal leading man: tall, resonant, magnetic eyes, a voice like aged wine. But to those who stood close, that aged wine wasn't a metaphor. It was real, and it lingered. On the High Noon set in 1952 in California, a 22-year-old Grace Kelly had to film a kiss with Cooper. The scene looked romantic, but outside the frame it was a nightmare. Cooper smoked all day, heavy Lucky Strikes, and drank strong black coffee non-stop. His breath was a mix of tobacco, scorched coffee, and old whiskey. When he spoke up close, people tilted their heads to avoid the stream of air. A Columbia sound tech recalled that the moment he opened his mouth, the cigarette smell spread across the entire set. Cooper was extremely lax about brushing. A room attendant at the Beverly Hills Hotel, where he often stayed in the 1950s, told the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner that his sink was dark with coffee residue, while his toothbrush was dry and stiff like a display piece. He once joked that brushing made his gums sore, so he only rinsed with whiskey, believing that spirits disinfect better than soap. The result was breath strong enough to bring tears to a scene partner's eyes. During kissing scenes, director Fred Zinnemann rushed the takes, cutting them down to mere seconds. Crew even joked that the lens fogged from smoke coming out of Cooper's mouth, not from film haze. Things were worse off set. Cooper often wore the same shirt for days, saying, "Old clothes make acting feel natural." His hotel room carried a heavy mix of old coffee, smoke, and sweat, so strong that housekeeping had to leave the windows open for hours before entering. A colleague said, "It felt like his scent arrived a step ahead, and then he followed." Even so, Hollywood adored the image of the perfect cowboy. On screen, Cooper symbolized classic manliness. Off-screen, a single exhale could make people want to step out of the room. And while Hollywood was still holding its breath from Cooper's smoke-tinged exhale, another actor appeared, a man who pushed living rough to the level of art. 8. Kirk Douglas went 3 weeks without bathing to become war, sending the crew fleeing. Kirk Douglas wasn't just a star, he was a true warrior in Hollywood, in roles and in presence. On Paths of Glory, 1957, director Stanley Kubrick said no one had ever lived a soldier's life so fully. While that line was both praise and a complaint. Douglas believed absolutely in method acting. To play a soldier, he had to live like one. For 3 weeks of filming in Bavaria, Germany, he didn't bathe, didn't change, and used no deodorant. He wore a thick uniform, kept on sweat-soaked leather boots, worked under 30-degree sun, then let everything dry as is. The old sweat crusted, new sweat soaked in, forming a natural armor of salts and microbes. Makeup staff told Film Digest in 1958 that they had to run high-powered fans whenever Douglas entered because the smell from his jacket was so heavy it stuck to the powder brushes. The camera had to be placed several meters farther back because a humid haze rose from him. A costumer said bluntly, "It wasn't a human scent, it was the trench." Disaster peaked when Douglas removed his boots. The lining, soaked for weeks, had rotted and peeled. A sound technician gagged on the spot as the odor surged out. When filming ended, his uniform was sent to a Munich cleaner, which returned it marked "cannot process," forcing MGM to destroy the entire set of wardrobe, something unheard of in the history of war films. Later, Douglas proudly wrote in his memoir The Ragman's Son, 1988, that he wanted the audience to smell the war. They certainly did, to the point that many swore never to shoot with him again. A supporting actor wrote in a diary, "We didn't need smoke effects. Kirk Douglas brought the smell of the underworld to the set." His living truth made everyone else suffer for real. When the film wrapped, cleanup crews had to keep the studio doors wide open for 2 days to clear the air. But if Douglas made Germany reach for fresh oxygen because of sweat, across the Atlantic, a British stage legend made audiences dizzy with the must of old fabric and stale fragrance. 9. Laurence Olivier didn't wash costumes for months, believing sweat scent is performance energy. Laurence Olivier is a towering figure of British theatre, a great Hamlet, a legendary Othello. But behind the velvet curtain, those who had worked with him all used the same nickname, Sir Classic Scent. Throughout the 1940s, while performing at the Old Vic Theatre, Olivier held a peculiar belief. Stage costumes carried the soul of the character and therefore must never be washed. He wore the same velvet cloak and armor for weeks. Under the blazing stage lights, sweat soaked into every thread, dried, then soaked in again. After a few shows, his garments stiffened like paper and gave off a damp, tangy, old sweat smell. A wardrobe assistant recalled in The Stage in 1951 that Olivier's dressing room smelled like a forgotten damp wardrobe. Anyone who entered noticed a blend of musty fabric, stage powder, and the inexpensive fragrance he used to mask it, a sweet, biting mix that made people queasy. When playing Hamlet, Olivier often meditated in a sealed dressing room, letting body heat and old fabric odors build up into something stifling. The stage curtains where he stood frequently showed stains from the moisture that seeped out of his cloak. Ralph Richardson, his close colleague, wrote in his memoir that being near Larry was like opening the wardrobe of an abandoned church. It wasn't only the clothes. Olivier also avoided bathing during long performance runs, fearing soap would wash away the character's energy. His room at the Savoy Hotel carried a heavy odor. Towels were yellowed, sheets stiffened with dried sweat. Housekeeping staff said even the hotel's hounds wouldn't step inside. His private life felt the impact as well. In 1948, Vivien Leigh, his wife and the star of Gone with the Wind, complained in the Daily Express that Larry's old clothes smell keeps me from sleeping. The paper ran a satirical line that their marriage is more heavy-scented than heady. Olivier remained confident that audiences could smell the truth in his roles. Perhaps he was right, because every time he walked on stage, the front rows could sense that truth with all 5 senses. After Olivier turned London stages into musty wardrobes, Hollywood witnessed another star who groomed his looks to an extreme, yet his glossy hair became a lively habitat of its own. Fred Astaire used animal fat to hold his hair, making his head smell like a frying pan. No one in Hollywood history danced like Fred Astaire. He was light, elegant, and so refined that everyone considered him an emblem of perfection. But only those who stood close knew that whenever Fred spun, the scent from his hair could make the whole room step back. In the 1940s, makeup artists at MGM recalled Astaire's fixation on his hair. He wanted it glossy and immovable, even after hours of dancing. Back then, there were no modern sprays or gels, so he chose to use rendered animal fat mixed with beeswax for hold. Each morning, Fred applied a layer so thick his scalp could hardly breathe. Under hot stage lights, the fat melted, seeped down his collar and along his neck, releasing a greasy, singed smell mixed with old powder. A crew member from Swing Time, 1936, told The Hollywood Reporter that, "We could tell Astaire had arrived on set without looking, we just had to catch the scent." His hair was so shiny it reflected light like a mirror, but beneath that sheen was a rancid aura. After a few days without washing, his hair turned sticky and stiff like candle wax, collecting a film of powder dust and sweat. Fred almost never washed his hair during the shooting week for fear of losing the set style. He rubbed his scalp hard with a dry towel and sprinkled talc to absorb oil, leaving his hair a grayish-white like ash. After weeks, the mixture formed a thick crust, clumping like mildewed wax. A wardrobe assistant had to boil his combs in alcohol after each use because they were coated in grease and smelled like an old kitchen. It wasn't just the hair. Astaire was famous for a spotless look. On the surface, while habits leaned the other way, he changed shoes on set but never changed socks midday. When removed, the leather pairs were soaked with sweat, giving off a sour, greasy odor. In his MGM dressing room, the mixing of hair, feet, and powder smells led people to joke, "Is this a makeup room or a fry station?" Variety in 1955 revealed that Ginger Rogers, his longtime partner, had to ask the studio to spray deodorizer on her dresses because Fred's scent clings longer than the music. Yet Fred proudly said, "I carry the aroma of the dance floor." To the public, he was the perfect gentleman. To those backstage, he was the star whose hair never dyes because it's been preserved with real fat. After Hollywood was left breathless by the smell of melted grease, smoke rolled in, from a man whose tobacco habit was so heavy that nicotine became his personal signature. 11. William Holden smoked so much his hair and skin became a mobile smokehouse. William Holden was once the golden face of American cinema, the symbol of mature allure. But behind that calm exterior was a habit that unnerved everyone. He practically lived in cigarette smoke until it penetrated every pore. During Sunset Boulevard, 1950, Holden went through up to 3 packs a day. He smoked while reading scripts, in the makeup chair, even during a kissing scene with Gloria Swanson. His dressing room was always wrapped in a dense haze, the tobacco scent fused with sweat, shirts, and hair. A lighting technician recalled days when the camera lens visibly fogged, not from mist but from the constant stream of smoke from Holden's mouth. According to Paramount Archives, director Billy Wilder once ordered a 5-minute stop so the air could clear. But the smell didn't just linger in the room, it clung to Holden himself. His skin dulled, hair yellowed, and his breath carried a permanent smoke note. Wardrobe staff had to launder his clothing separately with industrial neutralizers because regular fragrance couldn't mask it. Holden also had an extremely lax routine. He rarely showered after shooting. Colleagues said he often left the studio to drink and then fell asleep without removing makeup or changing clothes. Life magazine once described his Beverly Hills apartment as a place where smoke and sweat form an invisible wall. His pillowcases were stained yellow around the head area, curtains were musty, and ash scattered across the carpet. His longtime partner, actress Stephanie Powers, wrote in her memoir that, "Every time William hugged me, the cigarette smell got into my hair, my skin, even the pillows." When she asked him to quit, Holden just smiled and said, "I can't breathe without smoke." He also drank heavily, and the combination of the two gave his body a distinctive burnt aroma that Hollywood technicians dubbed the Holden scent. A Los Angeles Times photographer in 1962 wrote, "Standing near Holden felt like being in a bar that closed the night before." Ironically, audiences still adored that face, unaware that every on-screen kiss was a trial for his partners. Backstage, when Holden left, his smoke lingered until it was overpowered by something else: the scent of wine, raw garlic, and cooking fat from the man many called a genius, Orson Welles. Orson Welles ate a raw garlic, drank red wine, and rarely bathed. Orson Welles changed film history with Citizen Kane, 1941, but anyone who met him in person would say the great man carried a powerful aura, not of perfume, but of a life lived to excess. Welles ate like a Roman emperor and bathed like someone from a much earlier age. He craved red meat, wine, and raw garlic. At the St. Regis in New York, staff recalled that every morning his room carried a blend of old wine and last night's roast. Dirty plates piled up, napkins were slick with oil, and Wells sat there with his shirt unbuttoned, scalp beading, and crumbs in his beard. A New York Times Magazine piece in 1967 called his home a workshop of wine and sweat. During Touch of Evil, 1958, sound technicians had to move microphones because Orson's wine note overpowered the studio smoke. He almost never bathed, wiping down with a damp towel soaked in cheap cologne. The result was alcohol, perspiration, and cooking oil blending into a signature presence that made people keep a respectful distance. Wardrobe staff said Wells's shirts were always marked with oil and cooking fat. When removed, the fabric crackled like dry paper because the old sweat had set hard. His chair at RKO was replaced 3 times in a year because the leather absorbed a scent that couldn't be neutralized. His temperament made things worse. Wells often ate while discussing work, touching papers with oily fingers and leaving streaks across scripts. Once on BBC Radio in 1955, the host had to switch on a high-powered fan because the garlic on his breath was so strong it overwhelmed the studio, as they later joked. His private life mirrored that disorder. After divorcing Rita Hayworth, Wells lived alone in a Los Angeles house filled with empty bottles, canned food, and rags. Friends described it as damp like a cellar, scented like an abandoned Italian restaurant. He called it creativity and chaos, but visitors remembered the atmosphere. In his final years, Wells still proudly declared, "I carry the flavor of art within me." Perhaps that was true. His presence was a blend of wine, oil, sweat, and slow decline. Hollywood shines so brightly, yet the more we peel back, the more we see very real people, and sometimes very heavy auras. The icons adored by the world once skipped baths, forgot to brush, and made whole sets hold their breath. Glamour can't fully mask reality, and perhaps that's what makes them more human. If you found today's list fascinating, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. There are many more untold behind-the-scenes stories of Hollywood to come.